Thank you, Mrs. Fleischer. So this evening, we're going to put the slide deck up for you that you can see. This evening, we are going to talk about the 2023-2024 budget. We're going to look at the year-to-date, summary expenditure findings, and actions to reduce spending. And then from there, we're going to take a look at the 2024-2025 preliminary budget, which will be broken down into a review of the updated budget process for this current school year, fund balance projections, projected revenues, projected expenditures, and then the 2024-2025 budgeting planning next steps. Joining me for this presentation will be Mr. Pete Camarda, who is a consultant for us in the area of finance. So you'll notice that he and I will be taking different slides throughout this presentation. So taking a look at this first slide, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Camarda, who will give you a brief overview of his background and then provide some feedback on where we stand as a 2023-2024 budget.
Thank you, Dr. Fries. Just to recap a little bit and talk about myself. So I'm now in my 45th year of providing such service to school districts. In 2013, I retired from the School District of Pittsburgh after 34 years of providing service, and I was the Chief Financial and Chief Operations Officer. What have I done since then? Since then, I've worked at 9 different school districts as their interim business manager, and I've done 2 special projects at 2 other school districts. So in that period of time of 10 plus years, I provided services to 11 school districts. I've come into, I've learned a lot from the varying sizes of the districts I've been at, and I am quite happy to be here to be able to provide the services to the school board, superintendent, team, and to the residents of Mount Lebanon as we move forward in developing a budget. On the slide, as you'll see, is presented, we talk about 22-23 actual expenditures, our adopted budget, and then comparing that, then we have our 23-24 expenditures date and our projected final expenditures as we move forward. You'll see that we have a budget of sitting at adopted budget of $115,137,000, and we have a projected final total of $117,061,000. So there are reasons for the increases, and we'll talk about that further as we move through slides. But you have to understand what our process was. Our process was to assess and evaluate where we are at with expenditures to date, to look how we would be ending our 23-24 budget. When you're looking at your 2023 estimated final budget, then you're looking at trends and activities that have occurred that would let you provide the data analysis you need to go forward to say you have a high level of confidence that you are projecting correctly for the end of 23-24, that then you end up having the process move forward for the adoption of the 24-25 budget and providing the board and the public with a projected estimated 24-25 budget to look at.
Thank you so much, Mr. Camarda. And to his point about going further into the summary of expenditure findings, over the course of the last 4 months, we've done a really deep dive and completed a detailed investigation of the expenditures for the 23-24 school year. And right now, we are projected to be approximately $1.9 million over the budgeted amount from last school year when the budget was set in May. This is due to salaries being underfunded by approximately $1.4 million. Legal fees were underfunded by approximately $200,000. Dues and fees were underfunded by an estimated $150,000. Tuition costs were underfunded by approximately $2 million. The transportation budget was underfunded by $300,000. Yet through our efforts to review and assess all purchases, we are currently on track to underspend in supplies by approximately $960,000, which prevents a nearly $3 million in expenditures over plan. In January, if you were present for the meeting or if you have watched it after the meeting or watched it at home, you know that we've applied many different actions to reduce spending for this school year and to also be more aware of our spending practices. One of the things that we added for this school year was multiple layers of approval required on invoices and purchase orders before payments are made to ensure that it is something that we budgeted for and it is something that is necessary to spend money on. If budget transfers become necessary, a multi-layer approval system is used to adjust budget monies to accommodate unbudgeted requests before expenses are made. A stop spending memo was shared with all staff in February to allow only necessary purchases. Transportation this summer will utilize district transportation to transport for our extended year program rather than using an outsourced transportation method. And then we are continuing to regularly review and evaluate all vacant positions as they become available throughout the district. The next area that we're going to look at is the budget process that we took place or is currently taking place as we prepare for the 2024-2025 budget. This year's budgeting process was extremely rigorous and very different than past practices in that we wanted to ensure that our budget managers as well as our central office level administration were all involved in a process to provide an accurate budget to the public and to our school board. So the first thing that we did was each budget manager was provided with training on zero-based budgeting to let them know that the expectation of a budget from last year or even the year before that was no longer going to be the case, that we were going to build from zero and only include the things that were necessary for instruction to occur. Each budget manager was provided with their actual department expenditures for the last 3 years. This is incredibly important because budget managers needed to know exactly how they spent, where they spent it, so that they could make good predictions and projections for next school year. Using this data, they built a budget based on a tiered priority system of 1 through 3, 1 being the most, 3 being the least of the priorities, and a rationale for each expenditure. The budget managers met with an assistant superintendent or in some cases, all of us to review all expenditures that were included in their budgets. And then at these meetings, we had some pretty detailed conversations and adjustments were made based upon this meeting. The sheet to the right on this slide is new for us this year in that it allows for the budget managers to not only share with us what they were looking for in terms of their budget, but to also provide a rationale for that budget process and for those budget requests. I'd like to say thank you to our budget managers. Budget managers are typically teachers or principals or assistant principals or unit principals, and all of them came very well prepared to our meetings and were ready for a discussion and were very understanding as to where we were coming from in terms of being as consistent with budgeting across the departments, as well as ensuring that we were getting what we needed to continue to have a successful program here at Mount Lebanon. So I'd like to thank them because budgeting is not easy, and if you are not somebody that is used to digging in the way that they had to dig in, it was a big task, but they were up for it, and for that, I'm greatly appreciative of their work.
Dr. Fries, I know there might be an opportunity for some questions later. Is it okay if I ask a couple kind of in line, or would you like me to hold them for later?
You can ask.
Okay, thank you. So relative to what Mr. Cromarda presented a moment ago and what you just presented now about, looking at, our budget to date and then also beginning the process for next year, it was described, the investigation, a deep dive, a rigorous process. Who all was involved in those two components?
So for the process of evaluating our current budget and looking at the actuals versus the predicted, it was Mr. Camarda and the team within the business office. And what they used was actual data to make those predictions, which we're appreciative of. That is a new practice for us. The second thing, in terms of the budget process, prior to Mr. Camarda starting, we had articulated what we wanted this process to look at, like we trained the staff on what does zero-based budgeting look like, and then throughout the course of really the last 4 weeks, we've been meeting with those budget managers. So I can let Dr. Davis and Dr. Shulo add to this, but basically, there's been meetings almost sometimes every minute of every day where the budget managers are coming in, which would be typically a teacher and an administrator, whether it be an assistant principal, a unit principal, a principal, or in some cases, the director role. And they are clearly articulating what they would like to have in their budget and not like what they need in their budget, with a breakdown of priority. And then some really difficult conversations had to happen to ensure that we were applying our process in an equitable manner across all departments and to be heard, right? Because we did want to hear what their thoughts were, and in some cases that helped to better understand what they were asking for, and in some cases decisions were made as a group that this could be something that maybe we don't need for this year, that we could put a pause on, and we could do this instead to allow for savings. I'll give an example of that. Dr. Davis and I were in a meeting with the department. There was a request for a program, not just for their home use, a refrigerator and a freezer. And we had a conversation about what were the methods that we could use to get what we needed, but to do it in a more cost-effective way. And we sent the person away, and they came back with a much better option for us to consider for this particular replacement, which was a necessity to keep the program going. That's by sharing that story, that's a great example of the willingness of our budget managers and of our assistant superintendents to have difficult conversations that lead to a positive outcome for everybody. And I think that these are practices that we put in place not only for this year, but moving forward, because, to the point about how Dr. Davis and I shared the role of assistant superintendent for elementary, this was another opportunity for learning for our team that will make us stronger and more capable of making difficult decisions or being very, very well informed about how we're using our finances.
Thank you for the answer, and it really, I appreciate the all-hands approach. I appreciate that from you, Dr. Freeze, to Dr. Davis and Dr. Shulo, that are being involved in these meetings and really driving down to a very granular level. So I appreciate the leadership on this to take us through this process. I think that is important, not only in this moment, but as you described, moving forward. And I also appreciate the, cooperation of all the budget managers and all the department leads in participating in this and understanding the necessity of this.
Absolutely. And I will say there'll be some more examples that we give throughout the presentation of how hard people worked to help us to change outcomes, right, and to be more efficient. And those will be shared in some of the future slides as well.
Thank you.
So the next area that we're going to focus on is projected revenues for the 2024-2025 budget. And for this one, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Camarda.
I'm just going to dovetail a bit on the last conversation just for a minute. So as I talked about in my first discussion, I've been in 11 different school districts. I've had varying degrees of engagement with superintendents, assistant superintendents. The level I see here with Dr. Freeze, Dr. Davis, Dr. Schooler, and you as a board, I don't know how you put this team together, but you should be proud of your team. I've not seen this level in 11 different districts, except for the one I spent 34 years in. But this level is that I am impressed to be here, happy to be able to help. But, they are realizing what the task is. Then I think it actually, from my observation, trickled down into the budget managers. And, this is a whole collaborative effort. So this isn't just like, me sitting in an office, I'm going to just put together what I want to put together. Then we'll see how it falls. That's not what this is. So I'm sorry I just dovetailed on that because that's my feeling. And, every once in a while I should keep my feelings to myself, but this one I can. So on the revenue side, we're very close to our budget estimate for revenues from 22-23 to the estimated final for 23-24, the estimated final for 23-24. You know, there's ups and downs within categories, but, you know, you're ending up just, you know, very almost right on top of where you're at, you know, less than $500,000 on the positive side. On the proposed budget side, we'll talk about it as we move forward, the Act 1 index. So we've built in what the Act 1 index increase would be on our proposed budget for 24-25. We have I've talked with the municipality, we have some growth related to our income tax would be realizing going forward. On the state level, the governor, he made a very aggressive proposal with multiple components. We used what I would consider would be the item that's deliverable, which is the kind of a small increase. But then if a budget gets adopted and it has some component parts of what he had, you know, as his bigger wish list, then we would be able to add those in after. That would be a positive effect as we move forward there. You know, so on the revenue side, that's kind of just a high level recap of, you know, where we're at. The biggest issues, you know, we absolutely would need to go to the Act 1 index, and we'll talk about that as we move forward. Thank you.
And then the next area is projected expenditures, with Mr. Camarda will also review.
So as we discussed earlier, there were issues related to budgets and then actual expenditures at the end of 22-23. We also have issues related to the adopted 23-24 and the projected final for 22-23-24. As we move forward into 24-25, you know, we know what our workforce is, we know what our contracts are. You know, we can, you know, on a granular level project what our salary projection will be. We've looked at other areas where that were recapped earlier in the presentation that were not included in the budget, and then naturally those would be included now. So you would see what our growth is related to our proposed budget into the preliminary for ending the projected final for 23-24, and then as it moves into the budget for 24-25. Thank you.
Mr. Camarda, on the last column, the preliminary 24-25, were there any anticipated or estimated retirements included in those personnel numbers?
Yes, those are all included in there at our step 4. I think we typically do step 4 masters, and those are all included in there as retirements.
Okay, thank you.
So for this next slide, we're going to take a look at the 24-25 summary of expenditures findings. We wanted to make sure that we could provide to the public where we are right now in terms of what's driving the changes in expenditures from this school year to next. What you will see is that this expenditure, total expenditure, includes estimated $976,000 for textbooks and resources for our K-5 ELA program. This is something that we have been working on for quite a few years, and this year have made a determination for a program that we would like to implement for the district, and that would be at cost of $976,000. We are currently working with the vendor to see if there's any way for us to get that to a lower number. That's been an ongoing process. You just have to continue pressing. It also includes $183,000 for 6 to 12 textbooks, which include a 6th grade science and math book, as well as AP US history. And then based on the adopted 23-24 budget, this includes a 7% increase in insurance costs for ACSHIC, which is an estimate based upon increases that we see every year, as well as increases in Social Security, PSERS, Medicare, et cetera, which is a total of $4.1 million. In addition to that, the salary includes all increases based on contractual agreements, which is an increase of $2.8 million. Tuition is $2 million more than this school year using actual data and tuition costs. It includes a new transportation contract with an increased cost of $259,000. This is an area I'd like to highlight. Mr. Marciniak and his group, along with Dr. Schumann and her group, have done a ton of work around basically bringing that cost down. The original price was over $3 million, and they were able to get that down to 1.68 million. But the most recent work to consolidate and to ensure that we have great routes for our students gave us that additional decrease in cost. So I just want to say thank you to them, because that took a lot of time and a lot of effort, but we believe it'll be the best for kids and that we'll be getting a great service for our transportation. In addition to that, we have reduced contracts and applications at an estimated amount of $150,000. This budget does not include any capital projects, and in terms of capital tech projects, it only includes the first grade iPad replacement, second grade laptops, and sixth grade laptops.
Can I ask a question just to clarify on the tuition line item? Is it 2 million more than the budget for this school year or than the actual expenses?
Than the budget.
Okay.
So the budget for this school year was 1.7, and based upon our projections, it is tracking at 3.7,
Which is in line with current expenses.
which is in line with current expenses.
Dr. Freeze, also just to clarify the section on transportation, just briefly, if you could tell us any differences noticeable differences between current transportation. There was something about routes you had mentioned.
I think we still have to approve that contract.
Right, once we approve the
Oh, sorry.
contract, but assuming that we approve the contract next month, this is going to include routes where there's, we run very small routes of students, and sometimes we may run, because of the small number of students, one student in a transportation vehicle. This would increase the number of students in a transportation vehicle so that we could be more efficient with our delivery. It's a more sustainable route and way as well, and I know that that is one of our priorities as well as a district, and that allows for a more sustainable approach and utilizing a vehicle for more than one person.
Positive change.
Dr. Freeze, I have a question about the capital tech projects. We've sometimes had community feedback about the early elementary, first and second grade use of technology, and that seems to me that not everybody is happy that they get laptops that come home. Would that be something that we could put off to a future purchase and not include in 24, 25, or is it imperative that we take care of those tech needs right now?
So these are the typical years that we do the replacements. If we put it off, then students may risk not having a device. And in elementary, it's not bring your own device, it's provided by the district, and it could risk us not providing or not having enough devices to provide to students. So from a standpoint of a decision, it would be a decision to have or to not have if we don't replace them.
I see.
So the next slide, we're going to take a look at fund balance. I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Camarda.
As we discussed tonight, we're being given you the, it would be the audited 22-23 financial information. So that audited fund balance would be $4.6 million. From our estimated final 23-24 expenditures, our fund balance would become $3.2 million. Thank you.
So in terms of 2024-2025 budget planning and next steps, one of the next steps the board will have to consider in the month of April is the board policy DFAA, which is the use of surplus funds. It will need to be adjusted to to decrease the fund balance requirement of 6% because we are under 6% currently. And as we go into the next school year and budget season, that would be the time that we would address this. The administration will continue to examine the budget to find efficiencies and make recommendations to present a balanced budget to the board. March 18th, which is today, is just the board review and proposed preliminary budget. Between March 18th and April 4th, we'll be holding individual or small group meetings with board members to review the budget. On April the 8th, we will have a budget forum and board review and discussion here in this room. On April the 15th, we will put forth a proposed final budget adoption. On May 13th, we'll continue the board review and discussion with the goal of finalizing a budget on May 20th of 2024 for the 2024-2025 season, school year. And at this time, that is all I have for the board for my update.